lonely. I'm a boss, tell them not today. Swerving on these chickens, cluck out my lane. I'm a boss, out my way. I just do every little thing that I...
So, Maria, you do these coaching sessions all the time with like business owners, and you use that analogy of that desert island where you're actually trying to get people to think about what matters to them, think about their values. What do you tell those business owners?
Well, I tell them, pretend that you are going to be stranded on a desert island, and you literally can take 3 things from your life. You have 3 values that you get to take, and that's it. What are those 3 things? A lot of times that's hard for business owners or just individuals in general to kind of think about what are my values. That can be hard. And you may end up having to kind of make a list and kind of jot down a few things and kind of juggle those around, because it seems like it should be simple, but it's really not. What are your 3 values? What does that even mean? How do you define values? That's hard. That's hard stuff.
When you first posed the question to me and you asked, well, what are your values? And I'm like, I don't know what my values are. But then when you kind of use that framing of, well, what are the things that you would bring with you? And that really opens up a lot of kind of that internal discussion of like, well, why would you bring that? Like, what does that say about you? What does that say about who you are and who you care about and what you care about?
Exactly. And I mean, another thing to kind of think about is, if the desert island analogy doesn't really help you 100%, you could think about if you're making a large decision, like a huge decision, like life-altering decision, what are the things you think about to help you come up with that decision? Mm-hmm. What is it that comes to your mind? Is it, okay, well, how is this going to affect my family? How is this going to affect my income?
Sure.
Sometimes our values, we can kind of start to figure those out if we start to figure out when faced with any kind of like crisis situation. And it doesn't have to be a desert island. It could be like a house fire. It could be like fill in the blank.
Sure.
It's fill in the crisis blank.
Some really garbage situation.
Yeah, something. What are the things that come to your mind that you need to protect?
Sure.
When your protection mode kind of comes into play, what are those things? And what it is as a college student doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same thing when you're 40 or 50 or 60.
Sure.
Your values are going to change.
Yeah, high school Daniel had a lot of really dumb interests.
Yeah,
so
high school Maria did too. So I think most of us can say the same thing, that our values, at 16 are not the same as our values at 18 even really,
Sure.
or 20 or 22. And, our values can change. It's very fluid. But at a basis, there's a lot of times our values can be very much in common. There's a commonality with core values between many people. Mm-hmm. And so from there, I tell people, once you've figured out those core values, once you've figured out what is it that's the most valuable to you, what is it that you want to make sure and protect no matter what, well, then you can start forming your priorities.
Sure.
So, our priorities are directly based from our values. So if my values are one of my values is family, then a lot of the decisions that I make for my priorities are going to directly need to be in tune with my values.
Right. And so what do you get when you actually have those values and those priorities out of sync there? How do you reconcile those decisions and figure things out?
Well, and I think that's the goal. And I don't think... And I tell this to people whenever I'm doing speaking engagements or coaching them or, whatever. Most of the time, I actually don't think I've ever worked with anybody that one of their values wasn't family related somehow. Mm-hmm. And it may be kids, it may be spouse, it may be mom, dad, brothers, whoever, family related. Or maybe it's not blood family, but it's friends that are pretty much family. I don't think I've ever worked with anybody or talked to anybody that's not one of them. So, when we are figuring out our priorities, it always needs to align still with our values. And so it's almost like, think of like a pyramid. So at the very tippy top, it is the values. So right beneath values is our priorities, and right beneath priorities are actions. So if you have any of those out of sync at all, it's just going to mess everything up and make life
fall apart.
Yeah, it's going to fall apart. And I mean, you might be able to kind of juggle it around for a while and kind of halfway make it work, but eventually it's all going to start crumbling, and you're still going to have to go back to that core value to be able to start to piece it back together again.
Yeah, building that balance between that sort of flow chart of values to priorities to actions. It seems like you really have to understand that base, that like very solid tippy top of the pyramid before you can do any of the stuff that filters down through it.
Exactly. And another way that I kind of describe it to people is very much like kind of overused. That's the reason I don't do it a lot. But is like, think of a house. You know, the foundation, if you don't have the foundation right, it doesn't matter how awesome you build the house. Everything's going to fall down. Apart. So, you know, I hate using that sometimes just because it's an analogy that's overused, but it's valid. And it does paint a picture. So, you know, the values is your foundation of building your house. If you don't already have your foundation set, then you start to try to build the walls, it's going to crumble. Yep. So, you know, the foundation is the value and the walls are the priorities, and then you put on the roof of the actions. So if you have any of those out of sync at all, if you try to put the roof on, you know, without the walls and the foundation, what's going to happen?
Sure.
You're just going to hit the ground. You know, it's not going to hover unless you're magic, and if so, then I want to know that secret. That's cool. But, you know, you have to sit and figure out what are your values. And it's okay that you don't 100% know that. You know,
because they're always going to be in flux, right?
Exactly. You know, it's when you're sitting and trying to figure out a big decision or a big change or a big move, you need to sit there and ask yourself, you know, what are my values? What are my priorities? And what actions do I need to take to make sure that I'm in alignment with all of this? And that sounds super easy, but sometimes it can be really hard.
I can imagine, yeah. So how long did it actually take you to pinpoint this, to actually get your things in alignment?
I don't know that they're ever going to 100% be in alignment. I feel like it's fluid. I mean, I feel like, and that's another reason that using the house analogy doesn't work, because it's more like if the house was in quicksand and then like moving water was running through it, because
you constantly have to adjust.
Yeah, it's almost like more like surfing, you know. And maybe that's not like that for everybody, but I feel like it probably is. I haven't talked to every single person on the planet, but yeah. But I feel like that we're all pretty much alike on the fact that, you know, we still have our core values that we're just holding on to, our family and family. I just use family mainly because that's, like I said, a commonality. So we constantly are holding on to that. Like a life raft. But a lot of times the priorities and the actions kind of end up getting jumbled around all the time. And we still just keep coming back to, you know, what do we need to do? And if a lot of times if we start working on our actions without thinking about the other two, it doesn't work. It just does not work out. And I mean, it took me, I still feel like I'm learning it all the time. But it took me a long time before I started kind of taking a step back and figuring out, okay, well, why is this not working? And it wasn't that I was doing anything necessarily like wrong. I was doing it just like everybody else was.
You're just doing it out of order.
I was doing it out of order. And I mean, I think a lot of times, some of the things that we end up doing, we do because we think we need to, or we think we're supposed to, or we think that we should. And that necessarily doesn't mean it's going to work for us just because everybody else is doing it, you know, or just because, you know, that's how we were raised, or, you know, a lot of those things, a lot of times that's used as a good thing. Well, it's because of the way I was raised, you know, it's used like a good thing, but like, sometimes it's not a good thing.
Yeah. I'd say a lot of times it's not a good thing.
I mean, and if you're only doing it based on the fact that you think you're quote unquote supposed to do it, you know, and you're over the age of 18, you're not a child anymore. You know what I mean?
You should be able to make your own decisions.
You should be able to make, and I think that's hard. I can understand it being hard for like, you're just out of the house and you're just like a fledgling, you know, like going on, you know, 18, 20, you know, around that age, it should be hard. But, you know, like 40-ish, I mean, I wouldn't think it would be hard, but it still is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it still is. And I think it's because a lot of that stuff really gets ingrained into us. You know, what we're supposed to do, and you should. And, you know, I think we all have this baggage that we drag around from, you know, well, from our childhood, no matter how great it was, or not great in some cases, no matter how, you know, how your childhood was, we still have baggage from it. There's still, you know, expectations and all these things that end up happening in our childhood that then gets transferred on to, you know, friendships and relationships and, you know, parent-child relationships. And it ends up just being this big mess.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that is part of kind of the whole journey. And I think we all have our mess. We all have our baggage. And I mean, again, that's okay. But, I think it's trying to figure out that my values, my priorities, and my actions, they're mine. They're not yours. They're not my mom's. They're not my husband's. They're not my kids. They're mine. So, you have to figure out what is it that you need? What is it that you value? Yep. What is it that really, what makes you get up in the morning? What makes you really strive to be all that you can be? What is it that you need out of life?
Army commercial now?
No, it is. Yeah. We're all joining the military now, people. No. But seriously though, I mean, it's trying to figure out, you're defining you're happy.
Yeah, you define your own values, because if anybody else does that for you, then they're just pushing their actions through you,
and
right?
I think that can be hard. I mean, I think that could be hard. I know with me personally, it caused a lot of self-esteem issues for a long time that I didn't even realize was self-esteem. Because we think of self-esteem, we think, oh, I'm fat and I don't like the way I look and and that could be part of it. But I think a lot of times it can just be, we think that we're supposed to be a certain way or act a certain way, sure, or do a certain thing. And if that doesn't align with our values and our priorities, then you can do it for a while. I mean, you can, but you're going to slowly lose yourself.
Yeah. Because you are made up of the things that you do, the actions that you take, and so those actions, if they're not reflecting your priorities, then there's no way that they're going to reflect the things that you actually hold dear, your actual values.
Exactly.
And you're just going to really be, putting on that happy face. You're putting on a show for the rest of the world.
Which in turn, the more you put on a happy face without actually being happy, you're going to be more miserable and more miserable. And I can tell you this from experience, because it's real easy to get out and smile for the world. But every time you do that, you're being so fake to what's really going on. Why is it, especially in the professional world, that we can't just say today sucked?
Yeah, nobody ever talks about oh man, work is hard right now. Things aren't great.
I mean, you think about it, and I'm guilty about this too. You're at a networking event.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, hey, how's business? How's life going? And you're like, it's great. It's so good. Yep. But maybe it's not. Maybe you just lost that client, or maybe, you've been pitching the same freaking pitch for 3 months and you haven't closed the deal. Or maybe, there's a lot of crap going on at home and you're having marital issues. Or maybe, you've just lost a parent or a grandparent, or maybe there's so much messy crap in your life, but you can say that.
Yep.
I mean, who wants to be at the networking event with somebody doing that? Nobody. You know what I mean? But, we still need to be able to, I'm not saying in the networking event, be the one sobbing over there drinking your wine and making everybody want to leave, but there still should be times and places where, even if you're a professional, you can be transparent.
Yeah.
You can say, things are slow right now. I'm not really sure. And the rest of the professional community actually step in and say, hey, what is it you need? What are you struggling with? Because we all hit those moments. I don't care who you are. And trust me, I work with a lot of companies. We all hit those moments where, it's going to be crappy. You're going to have slow times, or you're going to have times where you're questioning. I had somebody tell me one day that they were passing the people in the streets that flag, the flaggers. And they were looking at the flaggers and thinking, wow, they go to work, clock in. All they have to do is stand out there and wave their flag all day. When they're done, they clock out, they go home. They don't even have to think about that flag the rest of the night. And they're a business owner. They're a pretty successful business owner. But just the idea of not having to think about doing that anymore the rest of that night was enough to make them think about it more than once. You know what I mean? And then that is, I don't know that I've necessarily looked at Flagger and been like, yeah, that's where it's at. And I'm not dissing flaggers. That's fine if you want to flag. But there's a simplicity to it that you're not having to figure out, okay, am I going to make payroll this month because we have not closed that deal we needed to close? Yeah. Or, do I need to come up with a new campaign slogan, or, whatever it may be. You're not having to think about it anymore because you're just going out there. You do your job and then you go home. So, there's no right or wrong. If you are at a place where you're completely cool working for somebody else and, you just want the 9 to 5 clock out and not have to think about it, then that's fine. But for a lot of us who very much have the entrepreneur mind, we might be able to do that for a day, a week, possibly a month, but we're not going to be able to do that long term.
You get the itch.
You get the itch.
It's because it doesn't set with those values, those priorities.
Exactly.
Like you prioritize. Let's talk about some more of your values then.
Yeah.
So like your family is number one.
My family is definitely my family is number one.
Which you've got a lot of. So
I have a lot of I have a lot of those. I have a lot of family. I have 7 kids. So so I have to like count. They're all numbered, and no, I'm just kidding.
they walk out.
They walk out. Yeah, they walk out like what is that on? Oh, Brother, Where Art Thou? Where they're holding the rope. I jokingly was going to make them do that. Then no, but none of them would do it. But I was joking around one time at the fair that we were going to do that because I was trying to lose some of them.
I just imagine like a thing 1 and thing 2 from like Cat in the Hat, except for it's thing 1, thing 2.
That's
thing
actually
3,
my
thing
9-year-old and my 6-year-old. They are thing 1 and thing 2. Oh my gosh, they're wild children. If you have them by themselves, or both boys, if you have them by themselves, they're good as gold. You put them together, and it's whoo. Oof. Usually, if we go anywhere as a family, the whole goal is to keep those 2 apart. The whole family knows this. They're all running. Keep those 2 apart. If you keep those 2 apart, you're going to have a good evening. Somehow they get together. It's almost like vinegar and vinegar and oil.
It just doesn't mix. It's just everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah. So other than family, what's number 2?
Well, I would say I value my independence.
Obviously, you're very entrepreneurial spirit.
And I have worked for other people. Now, I don't necessarily think that I was like an amazing employee. Now, I did because I don't like rules. And I mean, I could probably bring people that I used to work for. And I mean, there's more than one occasion I'd be like, why were we doing that? That was really stupid. Because if it doesn't make sense to me, I don't want to do it. You know what I mean? It might make sense to them on like the steps. And I can remember, having to like go out and check on clients and filling out call reports of where I was. And I was thinking, I'm spending like an hour. You're paying me to sit here and fill out these reports of where I was. Well, it's obvious where I was because, because
the work got done.
Yeah, the work got done. So, I mean, I just thought that was just stupid. It's a waste of time, waste of energy, waste of effort. And I felt that it almost undermined what I felt like my talents were. My talents were not filling out call reports. That is not what I wake up in the morning like, you know what I want to do today? Fill out some call reports. Yeah. No,
I sit in my car and do forms.
I never have said that in my entire life. And I realized, no, they haven't. And there's things that we have to do that are necessary evils of everyday life. We have to pay our taxes. I don't want to pay taxes. We have to. And I get that. It's fine, whatever. I mean, I'm a rebel, but I'm not a dumb rebel. I'm not going to prison for tax evasion. You know what I mean? But filling out a call report, do I have to do that? Well, I mean, maybe if I work for them, but guess what? I don't have to work for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and I think that freedom and that the freedom to be independent, I value that a lot. I'll give 150% to an employer, and even the ones that I was like, hey, that's stupid, I'm not doing that. Like any of the jobs I did, 150%, 150%.
Always.
But the mundane crap, that's the stuff I've always had an issue with, and I don't have to do that in my own company. So,
you only do the stuff
I do the stuff I want to do.
You do the stuff that you don't want to do too. Payroll, you don't.
I don't want to do payroll. I don't love payroll. I did hire a payroll company, so I just have to click a button now.
Well, there you go.
But I don't like payroll. But I don't want to get on there and check it and click a button. But again, necessary evil. But it still makes sense to me. Again, if I can look at it and it makes sense on why I have to do it.
You'll go with it.
Yeah, even if I'm not like, oh yeah, I want to run some payroll, I'll still be like, well, obviously the people work, they want to get paid, so I'm going to pay them. That's fine. That makes sense to me.
But when you're sitting in math class and the teacher comes down and they're like, oh, you didn't show your work on question 3.
Yeah, Mrs. Thurman, if you're out there.
Whoa.
No, I'm just kidding.
Calling her out.
Calling her out, Mrs. Thurman. It's all right, nobody from, well, I don't know. She's just kind of old. I don't even know if she's kicking anymore.
Ew.
Guess we'll see. But she's pretty old. She was pretty old then. So we used to have it out. We used to have it out because, I could tell the answer. I could remember Algebra 2. Algebra 2 sitting in there, and I could tell the answer, but she wanted to see my work. I don't know how, that does not make sense to me to do it that way. And I've got a very creative mind. Why can't I do it creatively?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Exactly. So, and I think so many things are compartmentalized that we can make a whole nother episode on just the fact that, education is compartmentalized in just the learning process. Maybe we will. Because I think the learning and I think it's a disservice to teachers too. I don't know one teacher that's gone to school so they could be like, yes, I want to go to school so the state can make me mandate tests all day.
It's like, oh, I would love to read directly from this book for 8 hours a day.
I don't know anybody. I think most of them went to school to be a teacher so they can form young minds and help teach them and help, guide them. And, not everybody is going to be a math professor. Not everybody is going to be a chemist. Not everybody is, going to be, an artist. Quit picking what kids are going to do.
I mean, it's like
teach them
you've
basic
done a billion
skills.
things,
I
right?
have done a billion.
And that's because of that sort of independent spirit, right?
Exactly.
You get out there and you're trying new things, and like you realize that working for somebody else means working for somebody else's values.
Exactly. Well, and it's not only that. I mean, I feel like all of us should be just students of life. And again, you can define that any way you want to, but like I know there's so much in life, so many different like avenues and professions and cool things to learn. And I'm kind of very much the type of person that when I want to know something, I want to know like all about it.
Sure.
So I just kind of like dig and dig and dig, and half the time that either ends up being like a degree or a certificate or something like that, because I want that piece of paper that says I learned it.
Recognition.
I do. I want that. I want the pat on the back. Yay, Maria did it. And
that's
fine.
It's
pathetic.
fine.
It's I don't know. That could get back to like the whole it doesn't. I don't think that goes back to core values. I think that goes back to like my internal demon issue of stuff. You know what I mean? We all have those.
We'll get to demons in a little bit.
I'm telling
we'll talk about demons.
It happens.
Before we move on to that,
exercise a demon.
Speaking of exercise, you're we were talking before the show, and you said that one of your values was wellness.
Wellness, yes. So, and I define wellness not just eating correctly, not just exercising, which obviously I'm a big fan of both of those, but I also define it as, your own just spiritual awareness. And you can define that again any way that you want to. You can say God, you can say Allah, you can say, Buddha, or you could just be just very spiritual and just in tune with nature, whatever it is. But I really, there's a lot of studies also that show that just having some type of something to focus on is very cathartic. It gives us a whole nother realm of and I'm not saying realm as in like realm, even
like
though you could. If you could, you could. If you want to speak universe, you're cool with that. That's fine. You do you. But I really think that it actually goes into just the whole mind, body, spirit. It gives us something to focus on. And, I am a fan of yoga and meditation, and I think it's again very cathartic. It really helps really helps with the focus and a lot of things. And another person, they may get that from running. I don't know why you get that from running, but if that's you, then again, you do you. When I'm running, the only thing I can think about is how much I don't want to be running. So I don't get anything out of it. But I know people that do. They're like, oh, I can think better during that time. I can just, not me. That's not my thing. Again, trying to figure out what works for you. There's no right or wrong in this.
Right,
there's no right or wrong value. It's your value.
And, being able to surround yourself with a core group of people that share those values. And
I think that's a big thing. There's a lot of us that, again, think that we have to keep everything to ourselves all the time. I'm not saying that you have to get on Facebook. Please don't, actually, because if you're my friend now, you won't be for long. And like spill your guts. I'm serious. I'm not saying that you have to just tell everybody everything. If that's what you feel you need to do, and you're just one of those persons, you just feel like you need to vocalize something to help somebody, then do it. There's been plenty of people that have just been super inspirational by telling their story, and even though it was really hard to tell it, they got freedom from talking about it, and they've helped other people in the process. And maybe that's the case, that's supposed to be what you're supposed to do. That's cool. Or maybe it's just that you end up with a really good friend, and you want to tell that one really good friend, what's going on. Or maybe you see something going on that with somebody that you kind of notice the signs of, and you've been through that, and you want to reach another person to help them just because you've been there. Whatever it is. Again, no right or wrong. But I think that not talking about stuff just because we think we can't talk about stuff and we're internalizing it all, eventually the pressure cooker is going to blow.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's a really good place to kind of transition to our next topic. So we've defined, we've talked about defining your values, but your chaos. Like everybody has that level of chaos. And how do you define chaos? Like what does that mean?
I think that's hard. I think that's actually more hard than defining success. Defining success, I think, is a little bit easier than chaos
Yeah?
because
So how do you define chaos?
the way I define chaos is maybe not going to be the way you define chaos. You know, you may come to my house and be like, oh my God, this is chaos. And it is. But it's survivable chaos to me. I mean, I'm used to it. It's my everyday.
Sure.
So I think you almost become like immune. You get this like immunity based on what you've been through at that moment. So, you know, if you come to my house with my kids fighting over whose shirt that is and the boys jumping up and down on the couch and, you know, just whatever else is going on in my house, and I'm just like, whatever, this is my everyday, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, chaos. You're not going to be able to function. You know, it's going to paralyze you for that moment at least until you kind of get used to it. I think it's trying to figure out, well, I guess that kind of leads me to this too. You need to figure out what chaos you're okay dealing with. There's chaos that's very unhealthy chaos. Now, my kids jumping around and, you know, whatever, that's okay chaos. That's this like part of having a big family chaos. Now, if it's something abusive or, you know, something like that, that is not a chaos that you're ever supposed to. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. Don't think that I'm like, okay, well, you should just be immune to this chaos. No. You know, there's certain chaotic situations that, yeah, it might be really causing chaos in your life. And I may be sitting here saying that, you know, a lot of times you can be successful in your chaos, but there's obviously things that are off the table.
And that's, I mean, some things are definitely off limits there, but like the idea of building an immunity to chaos is not inherently like a good thing, and it's definitely not always a good thing.
No, it's not. And I mean, you know, whenever you're dealing with somebody that, you know, kind of grew up a little bit rough and, you know, maybe didn't have the, you know, Norman Rockwell family.
Which who does?
Again, I think it's like that. I think that was like the first social media Facebook status.
Yeah.
Like that everybody's like, oh, if I was only Norman Rockwell's family, you know. I think that was the first of that. But, you know, I don't know anybody that grew up like that either, but let's pretend that there was. I didn't, you know, and we all have, again, our own little hang-ups and stuff that kind of give us this immunity to chaos. And, you know, we have things that end up happening that maybe make it to where we maybe can't function or things are a little harder, and we have two choices with whatever we're given in life. You can either kind of let it break you, or you can kind of shake it off and move on and make a decision based on that. Again, if it's an abuse, your decision should be get out of the abuse.
Yeah.
You know, if it's just that you don't really like your home life environment growing up, well, guess what? You work and you get an education or get a job and you get out of that environment. You know, we have decisions. Mm-hmm.
You find, going back to your values, you know, you find your values, and like if your value is having a home life that's different than what you grew up with, then making that a priority, you know, using your priorities to set your actions and to get you to the point where you are separate from wherever it is that you're trying to get away from.
Well, and another thing that we need to think about is, you know, from the outside, chaos can look a lot different. You know, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, you wouldn't understand because, I mean, your life's so great. And, I mean, my life's great. I mean, I love my kids. Sometimes I want to smack them, but I still love them.
I thought you were going to say some of them more than others.
Actually, I jokingly say that. I'll be like, you're my favorite. And they're like, you say that to everybody. And I do. I use it to my advantage. But, you know, it's a whole other story. But anyway, yeah, you know, from the outside, people may think, oh my gosh, she's everything's so easy and she's got so much going for her. And it's not that I don't. I mean, I definitely have. I have overall a good life, but I have some hard stuff in my life, like a lot of other people. Mm-hmm. It's just, you know, I don't go around like saying it all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't go around like saying it all the time. There's a few people I know there's stuff going on. There's always stuff going on. But for most people, there's always something going on underneath the surface.
Right.
And, you know, I may think like it's like the worst thing ever. That's somebody else. Like, you could be going through something way worse and be thinking, oh, I wish I was going through her chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest point is just realizing that hard is hard. You know, like the hard in my life, it doesn't matter if it's something super small and mundane to other people. Mm-hmm. It's a big event right now for me, and it's something that I'm dealing with, right?
Well, and it's very much an in the moment type of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a dark thought a little bit, but I know I've talked to people who work suicide hotlines, and they've told me that if they can get that person to just wait till the next day, just don't do it tonight.
Just getting through that moment.
Get through to the next day. Just wait till tomorrow. Mm-hmm. If you're dead set that you're going to do this, wait till tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And if they do, it just doesn't happen because at that moment they've been able to think about it. They've been able to find something, some kind of a glimmer, a ray of hope, of a good point. they've got at least out of, maybe they're not completely out of the darkness, but they're out of it enough that they've seen that shimmer.
Right.
That they just don't do it.
It gives them the hope, and people realize that a hard moment passes.
It does. And I mean, you can sit and think about it. I know I can. I can think back on things I thought, this is it. This is the worst thing ever. This is awful. And it sucked. I'm not saying it didn't suck. I can look back now and be like, wow, that sucked. But was it like debilitating? No. Did it seem debilitating at the moment? Absolutely.
Of course.
You're paralyzed. You don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
You're paralyzed with fear, with the what ifs, and, depending on, again, where you are in your life and what you've experienced at that point, it could be the worst thing you've ever gone through. But put one foot in front of the other and just get to that next moment until you can get far enough out of that you can actually take a step back and say, okay, what do I need to do? And sometimes there's not a lot you can do. That's another thing. Depending on what kind of situation you're in, you might not have a whole lot of decisions you get to make on that. You lose a spouse suddenly. I mean, you can't unlose your spouse.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of decisions that you can make based on changing that.
Sure.
But you can make decisions to not make things worse.
Right. And it's the difference between reacting to something and picking your action.
Exactly.
So something happens, something big, major, tragic, or just an everyday piece of chaos. You're not going with your gut instinct. You're sitting there and you're thinking about your next step and the step after that.
Exactly. So, well, and that's the thing. You need to act and not react. Yeah. I mean, that's it as a core. And that's so much easier said than done. It almost needs to become a mantra.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of times, if you think back to your dumbest decisions, well, not kind of like teenage years or something like that, in college, all that, but your dumbest adult decisions, it's always been like you're making these knee-jerk decisions.
Sure.
Because you feel you're in the middle of the chaos, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to make this decision now. I have to. Well, no, do you really need to? I mean, if it's literally not like life and death at that moment, you're not like standing in the middle of traffic and you have to decide to move.
Sure.
Then no, take a step back. Do not make big giant decisions in the middle of chaos if you can help it.
Sure.
You need to take a step back, take a breath, and actually make a real decision. Because I know a lot of the things that I've jumped and done, looking back, I was like, why? And it ends up just making it more chaotic. It doesn't make it less chaotic.
Not at all.
But, I'm very much a fixer, or at least on the surface. Like, I surface fix. I mean, especially, like, I'll be like, oh, I gotta fix this now. I gotta fix this now. I gotta fix this now because I'm a fixer. I'm a fixer with my job. You know what I mean?
Literally.
Yeah. So, like, I try to do that with, like, personal life things that sometimes there's no fix, really. It's more just, okay, well, we need to do this action to try to make this like this and this action to make this like this. There's not like a 100%, it's not a Band-Aid. It's situational most of the time. So, and I think my biggest problem is, trying to figure out, what actions I need to take and not knee-jerk react. Because then, I knee-jerk react. It's almost like taking a dive off a cliff, you know? And then you get down to the bottom, you're like, crap. I was better off
now how do I get
up?
up?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of us that end up like that.
Yep. Yeah. Picking actions, not reacting.
Exactly.
I think that's solid. So, like we were talking about with everybody's chaos being different, it's the idea of when you're inside of that chaos, that's all you see. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how big the scope of that chaos is. If that's all you see, then that's going to shape everything.
Exactly. It's almost like being in a fog. Mm-hmm. In a fog, if you're in a really deep, thick fog, you could be surrounded by an entire city, but you're going to feel like so isolated and alone because you don't see anything else.
Yeah. And it's about those tiny little actions that you've chosen that you're putting forward one foot in front of the other until you actually get out of that.
Exactly. And depending on what kind of situation you're in, that might take a while. It might be like mini baby steps. I mean, it may be just like actually maybe just standing up and preparing to walk may be the first step. I mean, you may be that far down. And if you are, that's fine. It's just, again, you're choosing to have an action.
Yep.
and not just reacting. You're choosing that you're going to stand up. You're choosing that you're going to take that first step forward. You're choosing that you're just going to take another step and another step and another step until it's easy.
Yep. And it doesn't matter how big those steps can be, and it doesn't matter like if those steps are hard or if those steps are easy, you know.
Exactly.
Just making the decision that you're, or if you try to make the step and you fail, if you trip, like the idea of just choosing that is what you're going to do, even if maybe it's not the right idea, maybe it's not the right thing, but as long as you're in that control and you're not just reacting.
Well, and I know chaos can be something that's life-altering, terrible, like I mentioned earlier, like a spouse dying. I mean, that's obviously going to change the dynamics of the family. That can change financial situations. That's obviously going to be just a big loss for the family as a whole. And then you may have something that seemingly, in comparison, is minor, like you're on your way to a big meeting and your child projectile vomits from the back seat. You know, if I'm sitting there mentioning losing a spouse or your child getting sick and you being late to a meeting, I mean, it's easy to choose which one is, quote unquote, the worst chaotic situation.
Like if you were choosing between the two, it's easy to pick
it's
which
like,
one.
okay, well, pick, obviously, I was like, okay, my child's going to projectile vomit. But in that moment, when you're living that moment.
Because life doesn't give you the choice.
Exactly. When you're living in that moment, the fact that you're going to be late for your meeting, your boss is going to be mad. You could potentially lose your job. You could potentially lose a client. You're worried about your kid that all of a sudden just spiked a fever, just projectile vomited. You know, you're worried about your other kids at home who may get the, the same illness. You know, there's so many like micro things within that seemingly, in comparison, chaotic event that it can seem like the worst possible moment. However, you know, the person that just lost their spouse, they would readily take your place in a heartbeat.
Yep.
So, and I think that's part of it is just figuring out, it's kind of that old adage that, you know, you need to walk a mile in another man's shoes.
Yeah.
You know, before you can define, you know, how everybody should see chaos, you have to actually experience it from their perspective. So you can't do that. You know, you can't. So you have to define it from your own perspective.
Yeah, I always try to just kind of fall back on the idea that, like, you're right, I can't walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. I can try, I can put myself in their mindset, but that, like, if you try to do that for every single person that you meet, it's just exhausting. You can't do it. So just using the blanket statement of, you know, the idea that hard is hard, you know, everybody's chaos is different, but that doesn't mean that anybody's chaos is invalid.
No.
Everything is always going to be as much or as little as that person makes it out to be. And it doesn't matter the social media mentality that people put out there, they're still living it on the back end.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that the core of that is don't let it define you. Don't let your chaos define you. You know, it doesn't matter if you did lose a spouse. I mean, terrible. And that's going to probably define your life for a while. And, you know, that's okay. You know, if you go through something awful like that, you know,
it becomes
it's
part of you.
going to become part of you. But don't let it define you. Don't let it alter your entire life to whether you don't have happy anymore, you don't have joy, you don't have, you know, a prospect of anything that you used to love to do. Don't let it 100% define you forever. You know, if you know your child projectile vomited from the back seat, don't let that define you. Don't let it. Just don't call your boss and be like, well, I just might as well quit. You know?
Everything's over. I throw in the towel.
Yes, I mean, there's so many people that just want to quit, and you know that can be hard to overcome, especially when you've felt that pain and that fear. It can be very, very challenging to not just go ahead and just rip it off because you know it's going to happen anyway. It's inevitable. I'm going to lose my job. Might as well just quit. I might as well just quit because you don't want to feel that rejection, that pain. That you just might as well throw the towel in now. Well, no, don't do that. You know, and that doesn't mean you can't quit your job. I'm not saying don't quit your job, but don't do it because of that moment. If you want to,
don't do it as a reaction.
Think about it. Yeah, if you want to think about it and you decide, you know what, this job doesn't work for me because I have to worry about what to do about my child when they're sick. So maybe I'll go out on my own and start my own company. That is an action that's been intelligently made, and I'm just going to quit because I'm going to lose my job anyway. I'm going to lose the clients, and everything's awful. And you know, we all have those moments, those panic moments where we need a best friend to smack us on the face. Maybe on TV, like, you know, get a hot ass now.
That kind of
I actually think that's on The Incredibles. Have you seen that?
I don't think so.
Do you not watch that?
I think it's been a minute.
You need to. So anyway.
I don't have 7 kids.
I know. I enjoy watching cartoons. I will watch cartoons forever, and I am not ashamed.
So we've talked a little bit about, establishing and defining your own values and defining your chaos. But at the end of the day, the thing that most people really put all their faith into is success, right?
Exactly.
So figuring out how to be successful, figuring out, how do I keep up with everybody else? How do I do this? How do I do that? How do I win?
Keeping up with the Joneses.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
That makes me
yeah.
sound old, but I mean that's what they always say. You're trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Who are the Joneses?
I know some Joneses actually.
Are you
Adam and
keeping up
Grace
with
Jones.
them?
I know. I mean, I like them. They're pretty
fine.
cool.
They're fine.
They're fine. They're good. They're good. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, again, success needs to be defined by you.
Mm-hmm.
I
see a recurring theme here.
It is. I'm telling you that is the theme, and that has been my mantra. You teach what you need to learn. I'm telling you, you teach what you need to learn. And I wish somebody had smacked me in the face and told me that a long time ago. That I pick.
Yeah.
It's you pick. You pick for Daniel.
I pick. Me pick.
You pick for Daniel. I pick for Maria.
That's good.
You know what I mean? That and that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think that's the core of everything. Honestly. You pick, that whole thing. You do you. Well, you do. You do you.
Yes.
Do you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, with success, we grow up, I'm going to be successful. And what do we think? I know as a teenager, I always thought money. I'm going to have a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
Success is money. Well, maybe it is. Maybe if you define success as money, that's fine. Define success as money. If you define success as happiness, just blanket happiness.
Yeah, it's back to your values.
It does. Everything has to go back to that core values. And then from the values, the priorities. And then from the priorities, the actions.
Mm-hmm. And those actions lead to whatever your success is.
Whatever your success is. That's how it goes. You need to sit and think about how you define success. Is it the fancy house and the fancy car? I know, like with me, I couldn't care less what kind of car I have. I know I have friends that they're very much like they want the Mercedes and the Lexus and the Jag, and that's fine. That's fine and dandy. Now, and I don't want nasty comments on this or anything, but I don't care about that. I don't care what the car says. And to me, it's like I go and pay and drop all this money. As soon as I drive off the lot, I just lost the value in the car. I went down by half or whatever it is. I don't want that. But I have no problem paying a whole lot of money for a building or a house or something. But to me, that retains the value. So in Maria's perspective, I'm okay with paying a lot of money for a building or a piece of property or a house, but I'll drive my little Chevy I got out there that I paid $15,000 for cash, probably until dragging
until the bumpers just sparking on the freeway.
We keep the cars until
drive them into the ground.
Drive them in the ground. We don't buy the high dollar stuff. As far as the cars go, we spend our money other places. Again, we have our values. Our values are I'd rather have property. I'd rather have houses and to rent out and like buildings, and I don't care what kind of car I drive. I wanted to. I'm not pulling in a rusted up hoopty
yet.
There's still time. Actually, we have a. My son drives it and he whines about it all the time. But we have a 1998 Honda Accord.
A 1998. That thing is vintage.
I know it's got 300 and some thousand miles on it. But and he was whining the other day. He was like, "It's probably not even worth $200." I don't care what it's worth. It still runs.
Yep.
You're using it for free, and I don't care. So it's got some rust spots on it, pretty deep and good. But you know what? He's 16, and I'm surprised he hasn't wrecked it yet. So, it's good. But we bought that sucker for $800, and it's worth $800 for me. I have no problem. I'm not going buying him a new car. No. And that's fine, I guess. If your value is you want to buy your 16-year-old a new car, I guess that you're okay doing that. But you're probably going to end up with a big dent in the sucker, I can tell you from experience.
So let's talk a little bit more about how you, throughout your life, have defined your success. Because you can't give advice to other people about defining their success without going through yours.
I think that has changed rapidly. Like I said, my definition of success, when I thought of the success as a word, it was money. But, kind of looking at it from my age and looking backwards, I actually think that I was defining success just by proving myself. I constantly I was the oldest of 4 kids. And my mom babysat, and, you know, my brother had some special need issues. So I always felt like I was kind of lost in the shuffle all the time. And I was the oldest, so, and I was pretty well behaved kid, you know. Except for that 1 year, but we won't talk about that.
Or in math class.
Yeah, or in math class. We won't talk about that either. But I mean, I was pretty good kid. But I always felt like invisible. Like I felt like I just had to do. I felt like if I do good at this, then you know, I felt like, and I didn't get it at the time. I understand now as a mom that, oh my gosh, you can only be stretched. You can only like be like, yeah, that's an amazing picture so many times, or yeah, that's great, good job on that A+ again. You know what I mean? It's not that you don't enjoy it, but oh my gosh, you know, it's. I guess as a kid, you're expecting like the party for everything, you know, and that doesn't exist. And then, I mean, there was some rough stuff in my childhood too that went on, but you know, I always was constantly trying to think, well, I will be good enough if I can prove this, and I will be good enough if I can do that, if I can, if. So, and I think even though I am very much the mentality of I want to learn everything there is to know about something, I don't think that's all of the reason. I think that I was always trying to prove myself to everyone.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, my definition of success then was just like, I have to prove that I'm good enough. If I do this, then I'll be good enough. You know, if I do that, I'll be good enough. Instead of just figuring out, well, you know what, I'm freaking good enough now. I'm good enough now. And if I want to learn that other stuff or do that other stuff, that's fine. That's great. But don't do it because I'm trying to show that I'm good enough. Do it because I just want to know, or I want to do it. Just because I want to. Because that makes me happy. You know? And I think that was the thing. So now if you ask me how I define success, I define success as being happy. And being happy to me is I am very driven person, you know, and I still, it's not that I don't have things I want to prove, but I'm more proving it to myself now and not trying to prove myself to other people. Now I'm trying to reach a goal. It's almost like my own Mount Everest.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to scale and make it to, you know, the top of Mount Everest and not like freeze into a popsicle. You know, that's kind of like I'm setting my own personal goals within my family, within just my own self, within my business, and that's okay to have these goals of success as long as I'm doing them for me. Sure. And I'm not doing them because I think that I have to do that because that person will like me more, or that person will love me, or, you know, I can prove myself to my family, or whatever it may be. And I think we all have these internal struggles where we're constantly, or maybe it's like you said, trying to keep up with the Joneses. Well, you know, that chick on Facebook that always has this awesome life, oh, I'm going to show her, you know, don't.
Yeah.
You know, don't do that.
Because odds are somebody else is already looking at you the same way.
You know, exactly. So I don't know. You know, I think a lot of times we have our things that drive us because it's something that we just really love. And I know, like with me, kind of my drug of choice is just business. I like business. Like I'm pretty much like a serial entrepreneur at this point. And I wasn't in college. Honestly, I didn't even know that was a choice. Like now there's all these like entrepreneur, you know, like classes and stuff. That didn't even exist when I was in school. It did it exist when you're a lot younger than me? It didn't for me. It was pretty much like your career path, and that wasn't an option.
Yeah.
You know, I remember growing up thinking you owned a business after you worked something for 30 years and you had a bunch of money to sink into a business. There was
it wasn't just starting it yourself.
No, it wasn't a starting of nothing. And that's actually like one of the little classes that I've taught recently was very much to that, and it was just a free class that I did, and it was, you know, starting your business with no working capital, because and there's still some people out there that think you have to have this like mass money to start your business. We don't. Now, if you want to go like buy a franchise or, you know, a ready-made like, you know, like turnkey business, well, yeah, you're gonna
pay for that. Yeah.
But if you want to start a business, you can start a business now. If you can do something that somebody else will pay money for, that's a business.
I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people don't realize, and it takes them actually trying it until they do figure it out.
And sometimes, I mean, like with me, it was out of necessity. It was more like, okay, the way that my job was going, I was going to have to travel so much. And I mean, I travel now, but it's by my choice. Again, I like my choices. I don't want to be told at 8 o'clock I have to be in Chicago at 7 a.m. and I'm trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do with my kids because I didn't line anything out. You know what I mean? I don't want to be told I have to do that. You know, in my business now, if a client calls and says, I need you at 7 a.m., you know, I'm going to be like, well, I can conference you. I cannot, be there at that time. I'm not going to do that with a window like that. I'm not a surgeon. I don't need to go save somebody's life. I'm not going, you know what I mean? If
the world's not going to end.
Exactly. I can conference you if it's something that needs a decision made now, or I can schedule it in the time frame that I can. I can say that in my business now. And again, my values tell me I can. My priorities are, no, I'm not going to, come and drive all night long and make it to your meeting at 7 a.m. just because you told me I am.
Yep. Just because somebody else's value is, you got to be there.
Exactly. I'm not doing that because that's not fair to my kids. That's not fair to me, and I'm not doing it. And I can say that. And if I lose a client because I say that, well, they're not the right fit for me anyway.
Sure.
And I'm fine with that.
When do you think you actually realized, the fact that value and, self-worth are two different things?
I think, like everything else, I think it's been a journey. But I know, I feel like every year I say this. I feel like every year I say, this year really has been an eye-opener. And I can say that again this year. This year has really been an eye-opener. But it's back to these crisis moments. We had my grandma was diagnosed with a brain tumor last December, which she was everybody has that anchor person in their life and in their family. She was our anchor.
Yeah.
She's diagnosed.
The matriarch.
So she was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and she was already just not herself. She didn't understand things really. She was real slow to respond. So it was instant overnight. She was there, but she wasn't there, which was really hard. And then she ended up, getting worse and worse and worse. And in the meantime, my grandpa, it's almost like he gave up on life. He had COPD, but he was, doing all right. And then all of a sudden he started doing really bad, really fast. It's like he literally gave up. And he passed away in February this year. And then 6 weeks later, we lost my grandma, the brain tumors. And then 2 weeks later, we lost my great-grandma. So I went from having 3 grandparents still alive to none. So, and it was really hard because they practically, they practically raised me. I was there all the time. And, my grandparents were you have the people that, even if they make you mad, and, even though we argued about some stuff, especially I know we argued about her church a lot, that kind of stuff. And we had these little argument things all the time, but still she was a person. So losing her, I could feel, that I was starting to unravel. And, when you're going through a whole lot, especially if you're supposed to be a strong person, you're supposed to be the strong one, you tend to internalize a lot of it. And it was really hard because we had just signed on to buy a building. So we're renovating the building in the middle of all this. And it had a lot of work, and it had sat empty for a few years. So we're in the middle of renovating this. I had just rebranded myself for my Reset Business Consulting. I rebranded myself in the September before she was diagnosed. And so we're in the middle of all this already life-altering stuff that should have been good, but it's still life-altering, and then all this other life-altering bad stuff happens, and you feel like you're playing this balloon game. I actually feel like the balloon game analogy works for everything in life, but you feel like you're in life, we're all just running around just trying to keep the balloons in the air. Don't let them touch the ground. And then I feel like during that moment, I was losing the balloons one by one. They were just hitting the ground. And one by one, as they start to hit the ground, you start to panic a little more because it's they're hitting the ground and you don't really know how to do with it. So you almost get paralyzed. Sure. It was there. And then it was an aha moment, but it wasn't a good aha moment. Right. It was just more of this aha moment that I was just I felt like I was empty and numb and paralyzed. So, but I still had responsibilities. I had a business and I had buildings and I had a family. So I could have chosen to go lay in my bed and cover up and not get out of bed. That could have been a choice. And at that moment, that felt like that was an option because I just didn't want to deal with anything. But instead, I put one foot in front of the other. And some days it was hard. It was super hard. But, it was during that time that I started trying to figure out, okay, well, this is what's important to me. screw that. I'm not dealing with that anymore. This is what's important to me, and screw that. I'm not dealing with that anymore. It's almost like I was just kind of like going through and just picking the flowers I wanted. Picking my own bouquet. This is my life.
You weren't reacting to the balloons that were falling. You were actively choosing which balloons you were keeping in the air.
Exactly. And, and does that mean that I didn't have my moment where I was like, why me?
Of course.
No, I did. Did I not have, am I saying I didn't have the moment where I just was like, just let everybody leave me alone and I'm done? Yeah, actually, honestly, I have that moment a lot. There's more than one time a week that I go home and I'm like, I quit everything. I'm done. And I think we all have those moments and those feelings because life can be so hard. But I think it's whenever it gets like that, and even if it's just the normal crap week where you're like, I'm done, I quit, which, I do that over like nothingness and then I do that over something.
It's the same. It's the same response.
It's the same response. I'm like, I'm done, give me the wine. My husband knows the drill. So, I think it's the fact that, number one, fine, sit down, drink a glass of wine, unwind, but it's that next morning, obviously put the wine down, become alcoholic, that's a good thing. And then putting one foot in front of the other, and if it's something that you can do something about that caused that, the fact that you felt like that, then deal with it.
Act on it. Yeah.
If it's the boss that's always breathing down your neck over something you did not do wrong, it's just them. Well, what? Stand up for yourself. Just say, I don't really appreciate you talking to me like this. I am doing my best. Obviously be respectful, but I'm not saying every boss is going to be okay with that. There's probably a lot of them all. They're probably like, okay, well, sayonara, have a nice life. But you know what? Oh, well. Because, again, you're picking your values. If your values don't include being treated like a human being, then fine, I guess stay in that job. But they should. Everybody should. And, I've told the people that work for me, my employees, I want them to keep me accountable. I don't want to ever become that person. Right. Ever.
And because nobody knows they're that person until everybody around them has already figured it out.
And it could be that maybe you don't know what's going on in their personal life. Maybe their marriage is falling apart. Maybe they're about to lose the business. Maybe they have no idea how they're going to make payroll. Maybe there's so many things going on that they're reacting. Yeah, they're reacting and they're using you to react on.
Sure. They're not able to see through that.
They're not. So, you still don't have to put up with that. You do not have to, and it's fine to call them out on it. I would, choose to do so in a nice, kind way, but, one of two things will happen. They'll either maybe use that and realize that they've got some other stuff going on that they need to figure out how to deal with, and they've taken it out on you, and they'll apologize, or they'll not, and then, you're out of that situation anyway. So, I'm not saying go in and tell your boss off, but you can. You choose what you are willing to put up with and what you're not,
and making your own success out of that.
Exactly.
Like knowing that you need knowing what you need out of that business relationship is just as important as knowing what you need out of a personal relationship.
It can be just as abusive.
It
can because I know of people that have been in severely abusive work relationships and they felt like they couldn't do anything about it. Because, they need their paycheck. They have bills to pay.
But is that paycheck their success? Or is the success more about their happiness and about their...
Exactly. And, even if it's there's no way to deal with this at this moment today, well, you start making your plan where you do. What is it? Find another job. Start your own business. Work freelance for a while. There's other options. Don't just... sit down and say, no, I'm going to be treated like this if it doesn't align with your values. Now, if your values is I love to be treated like crap, then you know what? That's fine. That's your value.
Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. That's fine. But do not go against your values. And, you kind of may find yourself falling off the wagon a little bit here and there.
It's hard.
Oh, my gosh, it is so hard.
Yep. And it's important to not beat yourself up when that happens.
Exactly. Just get right back on the road again.
Realize that, that your chaos is not permanent.
Yep.
And that your success is an ever-changing thing that you're in control of.
Exactly.
Tell 'em not today. Swerving on these chickens, cluck out my lane. I'm a boss. Out my way. Or just do every little thing that I say. I'm the freaking greatest. I'm the rage they exclamated. LA Times, I stay on page 6. I'm even your favorite's favorite. You better tell 'em who's the boss, me.